Tak пока мы
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Nishal Goburdhan. I'm an internet analyst at Packet Clearinghouse, that's PCH. We're a research company that's based in California, but I work out of Johannesburg, South Africa, and I'm here with my colleague. She works out of Serbia. So I'm here today not to talk about something that's necessarily PCH specific. I'm here to talk about what I think is a project that's good for the internet. And I've got 5 minutes to do it, I'm told. So I'm going to go through the first part of it rather quickly. The nice thing about doing a talk about DNS, and particularly about doing a talk about DNS and what it's meant to be doing at the end of a conference like this, is that everybody understands what all of this is, and everybody understands all the problems. So you've already listened to the earlier speakers in the day talk to you about things like the DNS protocol being insecure. You've learned about how techniques are used to map users, so I don't have to explain the issues about what personal identifiable information is and how organizations are using this to monetize what you're doing on the internet. So I'm going to skip through to most of the problems. What you should be aware of, however, is that, again, the DNS is insecure. The DNS is being used to mine your personal identifiable information. There are huge problems that would happen if you're trying to query a DNS server, and the server that you're trying to query, for example, is nowhere near you. So there's a failure rate, there's a loss that happens when you're trying to query something that was here and suddenly through some incident on the internet is no longer here and suddenly far away. So there's a cache problem attached to that. There's a cache miss, as we'd call it. There are problems that occur when you're trying to, there are real problems that occur when you're trying to get to a DNSSEC secure domain, and the domain that you're trying to get to, for example, might not be DNSSEC secure. So there's an inherent issue that might happen with somebody trying to steal or trying to monetize information, and this is true in the real world. There are organizations that exist purely just to sell information about users and their DNS information. And we know this. I mean, this is not new information to anybody here. This is stuff that we've discussed in the meeting already. So I really don't want to talk too much about the issues, because as I said, I've got 5 minutes, and I'd rather we use them to talk about some of the solutions instead. And the last thing, and I'm going to say this just because my friend was talking about amplification earlier on, we all know what happens when you're trying to use a server and it hasn't been secured properly. And unfortunately, the ratio, I think that's the right word, the ratio of clueful people that are running DNS servers these days, as opposed to what it was 20 years ago, and I guess when a significant portion of us got online, is lower and lower. Just about most CPEs are coming out the box these days with a DNS server on board. And I don't want to name and shame, I'm sorry, that's not my thing. But it's trivial to abuse some of these, and we can have that discussion a little later on. This is an issue about, let's talk instead about a solution for all of this. Everybody here understands Quad 9. Everybody here understands DNS. So I'm going to speak fundamentally about what Quad 9 does. But before I do that, I think it's always good to understand who's doing this and why they're doing it. And that's what I want to focus on. So there are 3 organizations that last year decided that this was something, or 2 years ago, I suppose, that decided it was something that was important enough to do something about. It's IBM Security, so not the guys that make your hardware. This is the X-Force team at IBM, right? The guys that are involved in network security issues. GCA, Global Cybersecurity Alliance, and PCH got together and figured that there had to be a way to provide people that use the internet. And this is the regular internet user. This is not you, right? This is not us. We're not looking at the people that understand DNS and are doing this. But your mom or your grandmom, or your baby sister who doesn't understand or necessarily know enough about DNS to be able to secure themselves, how do you make sure that they get a certain measure of security in what they're doing? So IBM came up with the address, 9.9/24. GCA initially came up with the idea, and what PCH do is we provide the technical infrastructure for the Anycast network that this runs on. No information gets shared between these organizations. And I want to make that very clear because, the Twitterverse, and Martin said this really well. He said the outage that they experienced happened just for a few minutes, but on Twitter it went on for the whole day. The Twitterverse always gets things wrong. So when you hear people say that, oh, well, I don't trust this because information is moving left to right, I want to assure you that even though I work at PCH, The Quad 9 team is a completely separate team, so I have zero visibility into the statistics and things that they are doing because, well, they're a separate team and we don't get involved in that part of stuff. What we agreed, though, was that this was an issue that needed to be addressed, and how would we do it? So the first way that Quad 9 protects you is it doesn't log any query source information. Now, this is different from logging it, saving it for an hour, or saving it for a day, and then anonymizing it, or deleting it, or anything like that. It's just not logged at all. And we think that's important. We think that's important because if you don't log it, you immediately automatically tick off important things like GDPR. I mean, compliancy, no problem. We're protecting your privacy because we never ever store it. Okay, and that's really cool, I think so. It means that in the worst case scenario, if we had to experience a data breach, there's actually nothing to leak out from because the source IP is absolutely not there. What does get stored, and I'll be honest about this, is the network. So there'd be a lookup on the network to say where this network from, and we'd store the aggregate number of queries that come out of the network. And this is really important for one reason. If we had to see the query rate go up for a network significantly, so if you're doing 10,000 queries a second and suddenly you start doing 1 million queries a second, it's a red flag. So it's a way for us to contact you to say you have an issue and this is something you should worry about. DNS over HTTPS, I think, is quite scary. So instead, for now anyway, Quad 9 supports DNS over TLS. And there's some really good community papers out there that explain how to get this working. So I won't talk about that. If you're using pfSense, which is a great tool to be using, if you're using, I think the DDWRT guys even have plugins for now. There are great tutorials online that talk about how to get this working. And I'm pleased to say, I think we were the first, or Quad 9 rather, the Quad 9 team were the first to be able to do that. One of the things that PCH has been doing for years, and we do this across the globe, is that we deploy Dns Infrastructure. And as a function of that, we carry TLDs, CCTLDs, about 400 of these things or so, I guess. And the advantage of being able to put this within the same infrastructure, if you'd like to call it, is that the queries are literally moving backwards and forwards within the same VM environment. So the opportunity for a miscreant to intercept your packet and do something nasty with it is significantly lower. I mean, you're talking about a stack of machines here, and I didn't get a chance to stick in one of our installations, but you're talking about a stack of machines where the data is not moving out of that. So no one's going to be able to interfere with the queries as they come in and go out. So you're pretty certain that Quad 9 is going to give you the answer that you're supposed to be getting. And I think the thing that differentiates, actually certainly the thing that differentiates Quad 9 from the rest of it is the thing that I care about most for my mum and my sisters. There's a certain measure of filtering in DNS, and I want to say this very carefully, because it's purely malware filtering and nothing else. You know, you can argue about the merits of whether something is good or something is bad, but I think when it comes to malware, we all universally agree that this is something that is bad for the internet, and it's not something we want our innocent users to accidentally click on or to get access to. And the way that Quad 9 deals with this is if you try to look up a domain that's known to host malware, then there are 19 they call them TI providers, so threat intelligence providers, and a lookup is done against that. We use RPZ to do this. We provide you with an NX domain answer, so your user never actually gets there. And while it's trivial to deal with stuff on your desktops, your laptops, when's the last time you installed an antivirus on your television at home, or your smart toilet, or, well, you know, the internet of stupid things that's building on and on and on? I mean, I don't know anyone that's got an antivirus on their smart toilet. Maybe they should be. And right now, Quad 9 blocks. Last time I checked in was 2 weeks ago, but Quad 9 is blocking about 2.2 million queries every day. So that's an average of what it's doing. And here's the important thing here, and I think that this is the thing that you should resonate with. That's 2.2 million times a day that a criminal is not making money. And that's the important bit for me, anyway. Very quickly, because I'm being told I'm out of time, there's one other essential difference that Quad 9 is that from the other providers that you'll hear about, and it's the only large recursive caching server that's available these days that's being run by a nonprofit. That's being done purely to run a DNS service that's made available to the internet. And I think that there's I think that's really important, because in most places in the world, I'm told it's slightly different here, but in other places in the world, you can't buy and sell a non-profit. So there's no incentive for this organization to do anything but provide DNS. And when you think about it from that perspective, when you think about the raison d'etre for the organization is purely to provide you with, well, stable DNS, then, well, there's very little opportunity for them to do something else. They're not trying to feed into, a board or to subscriber base who is saying, well, you have to turn a profit at the end of this quarter. This is all about trying to deliver a service that is good for the average person on the internet. Because, of course, no presentation would work if there wasn't a map of any sort or a network diagram. This is an average indication of where a Quad9 is available. Before you ask, it is not in Russia. This is why I am here, hopefully on my first trip to Moscow, to make friends and to find out how we can help support the community here. So this is an old map, but the number is accurate, and we hope to hit 150 by the end of the year. And I still have time left.
Thanks. And wow, that's finally cool IPv6 address I can actually remember. Oh, and would you block DNS names in Russia as according to Russian regulation?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Would you block Russian, websites according to Russian regulation if you work in Russia? No? I mean, the Roskomnadzor would give you exact list.
So that's an interesting question.
Right. And you don't have to answer it now.
Okay, I'll take the fifth.
I'm not from the government, and I'm not here to help you at all. In fact, I'm about to tell you to leave the stage to the next presenter, but if anybody has a question right now, please, yes. Okay, there is a limit of creator questions that can be asked per day, you know that?
Yeah,
You're about to hit it.
Thanks.
Breaking the high score. So my question is okay, you are filtering some queries, or you are not providing proper results for them. But do you have false positives?
Sorry, do we have?
False positives. When you have some domain name in your blacklist and it's a mistake.
Absolutely, you're absolutely correct. There are false positives. We have had one problem that I remember, not one false positive, one problem that I remember where a threat provider was accidentally sending us incorrect information. They were dropped within like 27 minutes, I think, of the incident first being noticed. So we confirmed with them and that was whacked. So yes, there are false positives. Unfortunately, they do occur. But the rate is pretty low. We think the rate is pretty low. And the team is very quick to respond to anything that does come up. So.
Do you make these blacklists public?
The lists are not made public, simply because we don't create the lists. Right? So that's the difference. The lists come from people that you would probably recognize. I won't tell you all 19 of the operators, but some of them do this on a commercial basis. And they do this, and they provide what would otherwise be a commercial product to the back end of Quad9 free of charge, because fundamentally they believe in the same thing that we're doing, which is that the internet should be safe for people to use. So on one hand, it's, well, we're asking you to pay for this, but we're happy to give this to the Quad9 guys for free. And there's a balance, and the balance is effectively we don't make that available.
But
However, before you go on, if you would like to see if something is being blocked, for example, if there's a false positive being generated out of it, there's actually a query tool on the website that you could use. So if you go to www.quad9.net, I think there's an API, or the API will come out soon, you'll be able to check if something is being blocked and, well, report back.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry,
Thanks.
It's a very interesting topic,
Thanks very much.
but I think that's all we've got time for on this particular one. Many thanks to Nishal.